But to say, keep doing that and you're going to hell, well, that's taking the place that only God has. And we've got to be careful. The church has been very good at taking the place of God through history, and so have individual Christians.
Welcome to this special edition of our The Church podcast. It's good to have you with us. We're also doing this on video as well for, I think, the first time. So that's really exciting as well for us as we embark on this new aspect of The Church. We've got a special guest with us today, and we're going to be talking about whether we should keep a looser hold on truth, or is that just a capitulation to the culture that we live in? We'll be asking some questions like, how can we hold to our reading of the truth, but also honestly make room for others of a different view? How can we become individuals, communities, and countries that are generous to strangers and listening to those who hold different outlooks to us? How can we become peoples that hold certain values and certain truths, but are able to embrace others who don't, and in the process, learn from them? In other words, what does it mean to believe stuff, but not be a complete jerk about it? My name is Jules. With me today is a very special guest, theologian, Dr. John Capper. This is thechurch.com. Welcome. What are some of the traits of the Western world at the moment? Politics is polarized. In the religious sphere, we are certain that our truth is right, but often express that in terms that alienate others. In the online world, in which we are always merely a click away from being trolled or trolling, we are in a world kind of like a bubble, a world in which we surround ourselves with others like us and rarely cross the streets of the local mosque or secular club, a world in which we automatically suspect those who don't look like us or talk like us, where hospitality is a commodified profession rather than an attitude we carry with us. In such a world, it's not surprising that our public discourse is rarely civil. In this kind of world, how can we nurture what 17th century John Locke, the philosopher, called the doctrine of toleration, a foundational document for modern democracy? He saw toleration as a vital matter of public policy for the sake of healthy nations. He said we must allow the free expression of different ideas so as to discover the truth of something. But even beyond Locke and public policy that ought to shape any liberal democracy, how can we as individuals become not merely tolerant, but curious and joyful in the presence of difference? With me to discuss over a couple of podcasts is the wonderful Dr. John Capper. For those of you listening on the podcast, this is a man with a beard to make John the Baptist ashamed of his feeble effort. John Capper did his PhD at my old stomping ground, if I'm correct. Is that right? Cambridge, John?
Yes, that's right, Julian.
As well as having a PhD and teaching at seminaries and the University of Divinity here in Melbourne. He is also an Anglican vicar. So welcome, John.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me with you. It's good. They tell me I have a good face for podcasts, so we'll have to see how your vodcast goes.
Well, I've often said that of myself as well, a good face for radio. Yeah, so
yes.
Maybe something about the combination of the two of us will make it
might break through.
Palatable, you know.
Let's see.
Well, John, recently you, together with some others, helped create a training course for local churches called Beyond Judgement. Tell us what that was about and why you put it together.
Yeah, well, thanks, man. Calling it a training course is a little bit overly inflated. It was an opportunity to explore. So a number of folk in our church who range in age pretty well, but are still in the older age group, just clearly struggle with the certainty that they seem to see swirling around them in the lives of those who are younger. And some of those who are younger were just a little frustrated as well. So with the support of the the clergy who are responsible for the church, we put together this little program and said, come along and let's talk about what it means to live with a bit less certainty, what truth and what faith look like when we move beyond needing to dismiss others to shore up our own position and to find ways of living in those more complex spaces where simple answers are kind of true, but also kind of deeply inadequate. So that's where it came from. And our core principles were largely to give each other space to talk and to explore. So it wasn't a Bible study. It wasn't a course to train people to do something. It was an opportunity to explore, with me doing a bit of talking and us doing a fair bit of exploring.
It sounded like you started from a kind of generation gap question, but expanded it into sort of broader principles of going beyond judgment.
Yeah, that's nice to put it that way. I think we did actually write a series of aims. I mean, I'm an educational nerd, and so learning outcomes drive what I do. And at the end, to say, did we achieve these outcomes is important. And that gave us a sense of ownership. And we did look at the questions of what it means to engage skepticism and yet to nurture faith. Those two are probably the key dynamics. And we did that, we said, by inviting investigation through input and dialogue, which sounds very grandiose, but it just meant we got together and talked. I'm hoping to run a second group online this time. So Zooming beyond judgment, if you like, would be sort of where we'll go. And that's just a matter of timing and planning at this stage. But the first time in my life, I think I've had a waiting list for something, because we limited the numbers to make it an engageable, trusting group. Yes. And we did operate under the so-called Chatham House rule. You know, anything that's said in the room stays in the room. It's purely for discussion there. We might say what happened, but we won't say who said it or why or where they were coming from. I think that gave us a bit of security, because Christian's sense of prayer points equals gossip equals destruction of relationships has been the experience of too many. Sure.
So it's kind of anything that we did in Vegas stays quiet.
Yes, we didn't have to go to Vegas, and we can't go to Vegas.
So what are your primary goals then with this, and what would you see as your modus operandi, I suppose, or how you enable not merely a teaching course, but something that transforms disciples into being more tolerant?
That's a very big question.
I'm putting the word tolerance into your mouth.
I think tolerance is a good term, a complicated term as well, because tolerance assumes disagreement and doesn't necessarily assume dialogue, of course.
Yes.
But we started off with this faith and doubt paradigm, but the conversations around faith and doubt, in my experience, have often ended up being either a little bit philosophic or a little bit facile. So deliberately we said, let's talk about moving beyond judgment, and broke it into 4 categories. Human judgment, how we judge each other. Divine judgment, how God judges us. Religious judgment, bringing it into that conversation around different religious, and in many senses also ethnic contexts. And then the last one, relational judgment, where we look particularly at issues of sexuality and diversity in that area. Maybe it was an add-on, but it was a perceived question that many in the group wanted to ask. They'd not felt they'd had space to do that in the lead up to marriage equality legislation and so on. So framing it around judgment, I think, ended up helping us. And so the question, I think, for us as Christians is, how do we discern the differences in people? I mean, you and I speak with different accents. You and I have a lot in common, but some things different. So to discern that is actually to help our relationship flourish. But for me to dismiss you because you are different from me is the kind of judgment that damages relationships. So starting off with that question, you're absolutely right. It's about tolerance, but it's more than tolerating. It's about embracing diversity and moving beyond that sense of divisions to find connections.
This is the end of part 1 of our 3-part presentation talking with Dr. John Capper about going beyond judgment. Thanks for listening.